Debuting in Medarot 9, this rather unique water bug type loves to get ahead of the competition to guarantee no one else is allowed to take their turns. It is GEN00 Cybister, with the kit of Mobile Boost, Double Bug, Sea Legs, and the leg ability of Rush, which buffs the success and power of equipped melee parts if the number equipped exceeds that of the target. Now, as a model available in Medarot S's permanent banner, Cybister is a model that you really can't ever go wrong with seeing because, being completely honest, you're going to see him a pretty fair number of times in your gold pulls when you're pulling for the gacha. And you're going to come to find that you might love him or you might hate him depending on how you choose to use him. Mobile Boost on the head is a support-based skill that, once activated, will boost the mobility of himself and all allies by about 50%, which means that if he wasn't quite going speedy before, you can definitely guarantee he will be once that effect does go live. And that will be a very considerable boost to guarantee you will have that edge on the competition when it comes to speed. Right and left arm of Bug are essentially very well known for their ability to turn skip opponents. And upon successfully catching a foe in their heat phase, you will inflict them with Bug, which will effectively turn skip them when they finish their turn. But during their cooldown phase, they will also be slapped with No Defend, which guarantees any hit that lands is going to be very painful for them until that effect does cool off and wear off at the end of their cooldown phase. Bug and Virus have been known exceptionally well for stalled turn skipping, especially since, as of a couple of years back, they did officially patch Shock and Freeze stacking on top of each other for stun locking. So what you could always do with Bug is go in with Freeze or Shock to stun them, then come in with Bug or Virus to stall them the second time, and effectively waste the entire reason they got the line to begin with, which can make it a very good juggling technique if in the right hands. Sea Legs means that Cybister will have relatively decent coverage across most terrains, as in terms of terrain compatibility, Sea Legs is arguably one of the third best behind Multiped and Biped, the latter being arguably the most well-rounded of them. In terms of stats overall, he's kind of in that mid-range where he's not terrible, but he is just a little bit squishy, so some caution would most certainly be exercised when using him. A head HP of 3,400, arms about 3,100 each, and his legs at 3,650 mean that his arms are just a little light there on the armor, as kind of to be expected given the design. But on top of that, his base power isn't too shabby either, between the 800s and the 1000s, so even though power really isn't something he wants to focus on too heavily, the high heat and cool stats in the mid 500s to low 700s does mean that even before any other buffs go into play, he will have a pretty decent time outrunning most opponents or even staying on tier with them to try to skip their turns wherever possible. Plus, in all instances where it does apply, the Rush leg ability does prove to be a very good and very handy bonus here if you're fighting anyone that's predominantly shooting based. So you can guarantee that even if you may not be the fastest, you will for sure still have some good power and a boost to your success going for you. Leg stats aren't too shabby, but kind of par for the course when it comes to sea-based legs. A mobility of 673 is actually just a little bit higher than where most other sea legs tend to be, so kind of worth considering for that very reason, even if they can only support one heavy part. A mobility of a melee resist of 884 and a shoot resist of 707 are kind of on that very squishy end though, so certainly not great, but also not abysmally terrible either. I would definitely recommend exercising very careful caution when using Cybister on the field, primarily because any hit that lands is going to be moderately painful. However, given that he is a sea-based leg, it does mean he is packing a very nice base evade of about 1813, so that means whenever he is not attacking and he is not slapped with a no dodge penalty on cooldown or through an ailment, he will be having a pretty decent time dodging or grazing a lot to try to keep his damage overall low. That all being said, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Cybister a pretty solid 5 out of 10, kind of one of those middle-of-the-road kind of bots essentially. Even though he is incredibly common in pretty much any banner you're going to pull from, and you will be seeing him a lot. Grace or Grief, depending on how you see it, your gacha pulls. At first glance, he doesn't seem like too much, but in the right hands, he actually can be pretty solid. And granted, even though having Bug on both arms does kind of defeat his purpose with the redundancy argument, anyone also using Stat Cleanse also does greatly diminish, if not outright destroy and delete, any reason Cybister would be on the field to begin with the exception of mobile boost. But given that it's also a heavy part, that also does kind of show more as a detriment more than a benefit. As mixed parts, though, I do have to very easily rate him just a little higher at a 6 out of 10. His arms are probably going to be the most useful part on him, as they are very cheap and very easy to obtain alternative to turn skipping if you find yourself with the absolute possible worst luck when it comes to gacha pulls. And in the rare instance that sea legs are actually worth using, and they most certainly can be, since they are the only leg type to have mastery on aquatic terrain where everyone else is really just B rank or better, or worse, with the exception of float leg. The rush leg ability does actually prove as kind of a forgivable point to a degree, because if you could totally soup up your melee fighter with these legs, you could definitely capitalize on that bonus you'll get to power and success, while still maintaining a competitive edge on watery terrains.